Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, IT Coach for Small Business Leaders. I'm your co-host, Josh Davis, Vice President of Marketing at InfoSystems. And with me today on a Microsoft Teams meeting that we're recording is Aaron Swan, the IT Coach for Small Business Leaders.
Good morning, Josh.
So let's just preface this episode by saying, obviously, we're doing something a little different today. We're right in the midst of the COVID-19 stay at home, if you possibly can, part of this craziness that is currently sweeping our nation and our world. And so InfoSystems, while we are considered an essential business and we are still working just like as close as we can to normal, supporting our customers to keep their IT systems running, our workforce, especially in sales, admin, and other areas of the business, are all working remotely, just like most of the other businesses around our country today. So for that reason, Aaron and I are recording this over a Microsoft Teams call rather than our normal in-studio setup at the InfoSystems office. So along with work from home initiatives comes weird situations and technical glitches and all of the stuff that you can imagine. So if there are frozen images or unclear audio or whatever it may be as part of today's episode, we apologize, but this is what we're all dealing with right now. And so today's episode, we actually plan on addressing something that should be really relevant based on the need for so many people to work from home right now. And so, Aaron, I'll let you go ahead and introduce today's topic.
Sure. And let me add on to the frozen screens and technical problems. Who knows what might happen in the background? You know, right now, space at my house is at a premium. I've got a couple people working from home. I've got a daughter doing college from home. And so we're, you know, those spots, those quiet spots are at a premium, but we're, I think we've got it. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about, this was actually a question from a listener about how to select a good home router. And let me be clear, you know, this podcast is all about small business. And so a lot of times you'll hear me almost mock home products because, you know, we try to discourage people from using home products in an office setting because they're not made for that and they cause problems. But in a home setting, that's what they're for. So that's what we're going to talk about today is a home router. And so first of all, what do we mean by a router? So the router, most people know this, but in case you don't, the router is what sits between you and the internet. It allows that one internet connection to come in and then be divided up between all your devices, whether it be laptops, phones, TVs, you know, the Internet of Things, right? We've got so many things connected now. So the router is what does that. Probably turns it into Wi-Fi, makes it wireless, also wired connections or some combination there. So that's our topic for today. So we'll dive in. First of all, let's just talk about, you know, in the previous episode, I think just a couple of ones, we talked about buying a computer. And we talked then about the buying a computer is similar to buying a car, right? That, you know, what kind of car should I buy? Well, it depends on your needs. Computer is the same thing. What kind of computer should I buy? And to a lesser degree, I think routers are somewhat the same. So it depends on your need. Depends on your house, your square footage, you know, how your construction, all sorts of things go into that. But there's some specifics that we can dive into. So let's start with standards. You know, right now I guess standard of the day is 802.11.8 or 802 802.11 AC. That's the latest, really well-used standard. Previously, you had 802.11a, B, G, N. So when you're shopping for a router, make sure you're getting something that's at least 802.11.AC. All your devices might not take advantage of that today, but this, enhanced speed, but over time they certainly will. I think we'll see things like 4K, for television sets and streaming devices will certainly drive that.
We'll be back with the IT Coach for Small Business Leaders podcast after we pause for this special message. I'm Josh Davis, VP of Marketing at InfoSystems. You may have seen me co-hosting episodes of our podcast, IT Coach for Small Business Leaders. Did you know that you can book a personal IT strategy session with Aaron Swan, host of this podcast? We created this podcast to be a valuable resource for small business leaders in our community, but we wanted to take it one step further. You can book a free meeting with Aaron Swan to review your IT strategy and help you build a plan that will lead to IT success. Just visit our website at www.infosystems.biz, follow the link to book your IT strategy session, and you'll be able to work directly with Aaron to build your IT strategy. Now back to the podcast.
And Aaron, let me jump in there real quick. Like you mentioned 4K TVs. When we're talking smart TVs, especially that are connected to the Wi-Fi and all of these other smart home devices, the more and more stuff that gets added to a network is really driving the advancement in the amount of bandwidth that your home router can handle. Is that pretty accurate?
That's absolutely correct. And so, you've got to factor all those things in. And we just, I was counting up the other day just how many devices are connected in my house, and it's shocking how many things that are on there now. So it just continues to grow. Coming soon, I think people who are watching this podcast today are hearing throw out all these acronyms like 802.11 AC and all these numbers. I think the industry has recognized just how complex that is, and so they're trying to change the nomenclature for that. So coming soon, we have Wi-Fi 6, which will be the next standard. It's really a different way of saying 802.11. See, I have trouble saying it myself. 802.11ax will be replaced by the name Wi-Fi 6. That's still somewhat on the horizon. May be able to find some routers out there that have it, but not too many devices support it yet. But by all means, if you can find it that's affordable for you, no reason not to go forward with that. But at a minimum, you want to get AC.
Yeah, and for anybody who may be interested, I know we had a podcast episode from maybe a year or two ago that talked specifically about Wi-Fi 6 coming. And I want to say that was a panel discussion that we recorded along with the Chattanooga Technology Council. It had some really good information. And the main bit that I took home from that panel discussion was that the Wi-Fi 6 standard is intended to mainly address the bandwidth issue, where most previous iterations in Wi-Fi standards have mainly addressed speed. This one is mainly to help with bandwidth, which is what we need right now. All of these connected devices are creating bottlenecks with bandwidth. So we need to make it to where more devices can be connected at the same time and all function at the highest speeds, rather than making the more limited bandwidth faster and faster. I will, when we post this as a blog, I will put a link on there back to that previous episode, so anyone who may be interested in Wi-Fi 6 can learn more about that. Now, here's a question I have, Aaron. When you go to, a lot of times when I go to somebody's house and have a need, maybe it's a family member or whatever, and I want to connect to their Wi-Fi, I'll see two different networks. One of them is, whatever network name with a 5 on it, and the other one is whatever network name with 2.4 or 24 on it. What does that mean?
Great question, Josh. And it just depends on how they've got their router set up. If you'll see the two different, some people just put them all on the same network and let the device, they use the same name and the device figures it out. But it's a great question. And so that goes to the heart of all these standards, no matter which standard we're on. There's two different frequency ranges that are used in Wi-Fi. There's the 2.4 gigahertz, and then there's the 5 gigahertz range, and each has their advantage. So let's talk about the 2.4 first of all. So if you're ever driving down the road and you pull up next to a car that's got that really loud stereo, right? What frequency, what sound do you hear most of all?
Bass.
Right, exactly. Because those lower frequencies really travel, and you can actually feel them in some cases. So think of that lower frequency as being the 2.4. The advantage of the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, it is lower, it travels further. So from a coverage standpoint, it's going to actually allow you to be further away from the Wi-Fi router or the antenna or the access point, whatever it is, and still be able to get connected, just because that frequency travels. Let me back up and say, most routers, if not all routers today, come and they broadcast both. So you're not having to choose a router based on 5 or 2.4. Typically, they do both. A lot of devices will actually do both, but not all. Some devices are either one or the other. And when I say device, I'm talking about the endpoints, the computers, the phones, the tablets, things like that. So they have to make a connection based on whatever frequency that they support. So the 2.4, that's more about distance. The thing about that base, though, while it does travel further, if you think about it, it actually carries less information, right? You're just hearing this thudding noise. There's information there, but it's not as much information as you get up into the mid-range and the higher ranges. So that's where 5 gigahertz comes in. A 5 gigahertz signal doesn't travel as far as a 2.4 signal, but it can carry more information, which in the Wi-Fi world translates into speed. We can get more speed out of that connection and carry more information. So, if you have the choice when you're over at a friend's house or a business or whatever trying to connect, you need to base that on what your needs are at the moment. If you feel like you're relatively close to the antenna, I'm probably going to pick the 5 because then I know my connection will be faster. But if I'm struggling to connect or that connection keeps dropping off, I probably pick the 2.4 so that I can be more stable and keep connected.
Yeah, that's great information. I wasn't aware that they had the range difference. I mean, I always heard about 5 gigahertz being faster, and I was always curious about, well, if 5 gigahertz is faster, why would you even put 2.4 on there? And so that's great to know that it's because of the range issue.
Yeah, it's really just physics, right? It's just low frequencies go further.
So other questions that I have, I mean, I know there are a lot of, when you're signing up for internet service, a lot of times you've got speed options. How does the router you choose have anything to do with your internet speed, and what type of choice should you make there?
Yes, another great question. Well, the fact is, here in Chattanooga, we're blessed with really fast internet. And so one of the challenges we run into from a business perspective on the business side, you can go and get a gigabit connection from EPB for your business, or quite frankly, even for your home nowadays. The nice thing about that, it's really fast. The downside of that is, in order to get equipment that can actually support that gigahertz, you got to spend more money to be able to get that whole gigabit processed by your router. Particularly if you have a firewall in a business setting, you need something that can handle all that decryption and inspection things like that. In a home setting, you're typically not doing as much security scanning. And so that router can handle more speeds. But as far as the router selection, you do want to pay attention to the specs and see what it can handle from a speed perspective based on what you've purchased for yourself. Some other things to think about is ports. Just the idea, we're talking a lot about wireless today, but at least as of today, a wired connection is always going to be faster, more stable. And so if you have the choice to plug something in, I would recommend that you do it. I'll tell you, here at my house, we have some streaming devices. I have an Apple TV. I've got my TV itself that can do some streaming. I've actually got those plugged into my router to make sure that I get the best connection for those. So, pay attention to how many ports are on there. You can always add an Ethernet switch, plug it in there and be able to expand the ports out, but have some built-in ones are very nice. And then one other thing on ports is some routers you'll see come with USB ports. You think, why in the world would I need a USB port on a router? Well, you can do some cool things with that too. You can plug in cameras or printers or things like that and make them directly accessible over that Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, as you were talking through that, I was thinking a lot of people now are purchasing things like home security systems that can connect wirelessly and stream the different video feeds, and they might have the doorbell thing, the different video doorbell products and all kinds of different stuff like that. How does how do those types of things impact your router choice? Is that really just a speed concern, or does that present other challenges?
I think it's just mainly just a compatibility and speed issue, right? It's just you're adding one more thing onto theirs. They're not big consumers unless you're. I mean, if you're running that camera all the time, that could be a deal. But if they're just occasional, motion sensitive type things, I've got some Blink cameras around my property, and they're not big consumers of my network because they only go off at certain times of the day for a few seconds.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know.
So some other considerations, you start thinking about security. Make sure or look for, if you're concerned about security, and you should be, look for firewall features in there. They're not going to be full-fledged firewalls like you might have at a house, but just some control. If you're going to be doing a true work from home scenario, you might want to look at quality of service settings, being able to distinguish between giving a higher priority to something like your computer. If you're doing something like we're doing today when you're podcasting, you want to make sure that this takes priority over someone watching TV somewhere else. You might want to look for some controls or something like that. Another very common question is, well, what about now some of the providers are starting to give you a router or rent you a router with your service. Can I just use that? In a lot of cases, yeah, maybe you can. They're starting to get better, the ones they put out there. They tend to be a little limited in their feature set, and they may not cover your whole house. So that's a decision you got to kind of look at and see if what they're going to give you is going to work as well. Some providers even force you to use their router. In that case, if you want to add on a router, you might have to ask them to put it in something called bridge mode, so that their router is not trying to do the same thing your router is doing. You kind of end up fighting with each other. We'll try not to get too technical and things like that today, but just know that if you're having to add your own router on top of a provider's router, you might ask them to put it in bridge mode to help you out with that.
I had a question that I was thinking about, and then I got interested in what you were saying right there, and it slipped away. But I think it had something to do with the different types of like range extender products and things like that are out there. I've seen in my house, I only have a single router, and it seems to cover my house just fine.
Sure.
But yet I see all of these products on the market about, creating a mesh network inside your house or adding range extenders and all of this stuff. Do people really need that? What's the use case for those types of setups?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So first of all, let's talk about that single router scenario you talked about. A lot of houses can get by with one router, absolutely, especially if they place it right. So let's talk just a second about placement. Ideally, if you can get that router placed toward the center of your house, that seems logical, right? So it can cover the area. Don't stick it in a closet. Don't stick it in a cabinet somewhere. Ideally, you want it up high. If you can get away with it, you can mount it to your ceiling, all the better. You may not be able to get away with that. But I wasn't able to get away with it. Mine's sitting up on top of an entertainment center up high, so that helps. But yeah, proper placement can do a lot. But some houses do need more than one. You're right, there's a lot of products out there, range extenders being one of them. I'm not a fan of range extenders. Typically, one main problem with them is a lot of them force you to use a second SSID or network for your wireless network because it can't properly repeat the first one. So depending on where you are in your house, you might have to connect to two different networks. That gets confusing. What I do like though is we're starting to see some nice home-based routers that allow you to have multiple routers that are all controlled and work together. They all use the same SSID. It's called whole house wireless. It is one term that you'll hear. You'll hear a lot of them have different marketing terms for it. So I'm trying to stay away from brand names today, but
sure.
Do your homework on that. There's several of them out there. The ideal situation is if you can get something that with those routers to where you have your main router and your satellites are actually connected by cable. If you can do that, that's going to give you the best performance. Not everyone can get away with that. Some houses, it's just not possible to get a cable to the other side. So some of them now have that ability to do, wireless mesh that you mentioned. And so that's kind of like extending the range, but it's a much better scenario because it keeps it on one SSID and it's all centrally controlled. So yeah, there's whole house solutions that do a really nice job. Like I said, if you can get a wired connection for what's called the backhaul, the connection between the two, that's going to be your best situation. But if not, wireless works as well.
So I remembered the question I was going to ask, and it was, we're recording this episode about home situation, wireless at home and your home router. And InfoSystems is not a home services company. We're a business to business service. We work with businesses to help with their IT. We're just doing this because of the current situation with the work from home initiative and everything. And we got a question from one of our listeners, and we want to help. So that's why we're talking about this topic. But I did want to point out and kind of toss this question to you. How would we help if companies are looking to make sure that their remote workers have a certain type of setup at their home? How does InfoSystems help in that scenario? I mean, we obviously don't sell consumer products, but would we advise them? Would we recommend that they install business products? Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. So that's a complicated question and difficult in some ways to fully address those concerns. I will say, from a PC standpoint, one of the things that you can do as a business is you can set your systems up where if you're allowing people to use their own computers, bring your own devices, things like that, you can set up if they're doing remote connectivity into your environment that those PCs have to go through a validation that they have proper security on them, like antivirus and proper policy settings, and that can be enforced through technology, right? Other things, though, when we're talking about proper networking security, like, one of the things for your wireless network, you want to make sure that you've got encryption turned on for it, right? At a minimum WPA2, pre-shared keys, using a strong key, those type of things. That's much more difficult for a company to know if an employee is doing that or not. So now it starts talking about, well, that's education and that's policies. So we can certainly help you, guide you and telling you what your policies need to be, but how you enforce those policies, that's a little more difficult to enforce through technology. More of it's end user education and possibly getting on the phone with them and verifying that those things are in place.
Yeah, and I realize that's a little off topic for what we were talking about, and that maybe that's something we'll get into more on a separate podcast episode. But it just came to mind. So getting back to the issue of home routers, you mentioned the security and some of the other things. What are do you have any final points to make for making a good informed purchasing decision, or other considerations that people would need to take in mind?
Yeah, just a couple more things here. One, there's some optional things that you can look at. If you have kids, you want to make sure you're protecting them, the safety of where they can go on the internet. Some of the routers now come with some built-in content filtering options. A real popular one is Disney Circle. It's starting to be built into a number of routers. Disney Circle is also a standalone thing that you can buy that adds on to a router, and it provides a variety of controls to help parents, such as content filtering where they can go, but also when they can go. So you can set policies on how much time a day they're allowed to be on their devices, after hours when they're not allowed to be on their devices, things like that. So it can give parents a lot of control. So certainly look at that as value add things for your router, or consider adding them on. And then beyond that, we're starting to see a new genre that adds on. We've had in the business market the whole idea of firewalls for business use, and you've heard me say many times on this podcast that that's an absolutely essential thing for business. It's starting to get that way for home as well. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast, I run a firewall here at my house. It's not a business class firewall. It's a home class firewall. It's designed to protect things that I have here. So it's been 2 or 3 years ago. Bitdefender was kind of the first company to market on it. They came out with a device called the Box, and now they have a Box 2. There's some competitors out there. There's Norton Core. There's Cujo, Dojo. I don't know who names these things. There's one called Rat Trap. These are all these are home products. They're not designed for a business firewall, but they're great at helping protect you. So again, they can do some of that content filtering, but more than that, they're looking for intrusions. You think about all the devices that you have. It's smart speakers. Think about Alexa and Google Home and things like that. I'm trying to not talk too loud because I have an Alexa and I'll trigger her if I say it too loud. But those are devices that could be hacked. Some people have connected refrigerators, connected dishwashers. I do not. But there's a number of devices, and so there's products out there now that are protecting those. And so I would encourage you to look at them. One of the nice things about them, they're way less expensive than a business firewall. So I think I paid $150 for. I'll go ahead and say I have a Bitdefender Box 2. It does have protection, but one of the things that's nice too is you get a site license for all your home products for their antivirus product. So you're not having to buy an antivirus for each of your computers. How many ever computers you have, you're allowed to install their antivirus on there if you own that product. And then there's a renewal. I think it's $99 a year to renew, which in my case, for the number of computers we have, that's cheaper than buying an individual antivirus package for each of them. So something to really look at. And just to sum up then, I would say read reviews. There's, get on the internet, read reviews. There's tons of people out there. And then if you're going to buy, especially for the Wi-Fi portion, to make sure that you can get something that works, is buy from somewhere that you can easily return it. Because there's a lot of factors that can influence how you can connect, even microwave ovens. We talked about that 2.4 gigahertz range. That's where microwave ovens operate, is in that range, and so they can interfere. So find something, test it out. If it doesn't work, buy it from somewhere where you can take it back and get something else.
So are you saying if I stand too close to my wireless router, I'm going to microwave my brain?
Well, I've been concerned, Josh, that maybe it already happened, but I didn't mean to talk awful about that.
Oh, well. Hey, I thought I'd throw in there for anyone who's watching the episode, you may notice that our backgrounds are blurred out. And while it's not the most attractive background for a video like this, we've done that on purpose, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next episode of IT Coach for Small Business Leaders. But in case you're not going to listen to the next episode, let me go ahead and say, why would you not? But let me go ahead and say that we've chosen, and we recommend our employees at InfoSystems that you try and use as much privacy as you can when you're especially publishing video content to the web that has been recorded at home. Because if people can see things in your background related to your personal identity, it might be family photos or memorabilia of events that you've been to that are hanging on the wall, or it could be books and papers or your diploma or whatever it is in the background. That's stuff that could potentially be used against you by people who are up to no good. There's a thing called social engineering attacks, where people will use whatever information they can find out about you to engineer a sophisticated cyber attack and try and fool you into clicking on something you shouldn't, or convincing you that they are somebody that they are not. So anyway, we recommend, we're using to record this Microsoft Teams, which a lot of people have access to this product, and many probably don't even know it because it comes with your Microsoft Office 365, most of the subscription levels for Microsoft Office 365. And I've been reading recently that they're even going to be releasing Teams as part of the home and personal editions of Microsoft Office now. But I just wanted to bring your attention to that. If you look now at my background, I have unblurred my background, and I don't have anything in the background here that is personal or could be used against me. It's just a blank wall, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to show that this is just one of the features. Now it's blurred. This is one of the features that are built into most web conferencing tools now. You can either blur your background or replace your background with a virtual image or something like that. We recommend that you use that feature, especially if you're recording something to be released online, or if you're participating in a conference call that has people who may be within other organizations, or people you don't know so well, or if other people could possibly be recording the call that you're on. If you're calling person to person between people that you work with on a regular basis, it's probably less of a concern. But I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. We'll talk about that in more detail on the next episodes. But we've been going on for a pretty good amount of time here. Hopefully this information has been really helpful for those of you who are trying to choose a home router and other components as part of your work from home, or just your regular home Wi-Fi setup. Aaron, any last comments from you before we sign off today?
No, I think we've covered them all. I would encourage you, to tune in. We were kind of joking about it, but I would encourage you to tune in to our next episode. We are going to be talking about, right now there's a lot of teleconferencing going on. people using products. We're going to kind of dive into those and just talk about making a good selection there and how you can stay safe while doing so.
Yep, there you go. So thanks for tuning in today, everyone. We look forward to speaking to you again on the next episode. And as always, jump on our social media accounts, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We constantly publish good content and monitor those social channels. If you have questions or feedback, that's a great place for you to get your questions into us so that we can either answer them on an episode or we could respond directly as appropriate. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.